Welcome to the Ethics Experts, where we're elevating ethics and compliance and HR to the strategic level it's supposed to be.
So I'm excited to get you on the Ethics Experts. We had a really cool, really fun pre-show. And so why don't we just dive right into your career journey? I always kind of like to start here. You've been with your company for over 30 years and you've seen so much change. Right. What's kept you engaged in this space? What's kept you on this ship through all these ups and downs in the market and all the change that you've weathered?
You know, it's interesting. I have a very unique job in the litigation space. I mean, I litigate actively across the country. I don't have to solicit clients. It's the best of all possible worlds. I love the people I work with and I love my work. I mean, those are probably the biggest things. But, you know, I also represent a company that I think is a good corporate citizen and tries to do the right thing. So that helps a lot. And the company philosophies resonate with me personally. And that just makes my job that much easier, that much more enjoyable. And I have a great team. Paralegals, admins, lawyers, they're all fantastic. So a lot of good things to commend this job.
The corporate philosophy, was that something that attracted you to the business, or is that something that over time it's really resonated with you and kind of kept you there? You know, because I mean, sometimes people like select their company based on that kind of a thing. How has that been for you?
You know, really, I came here because I wanted to litigate, and I didn't come from a background where I had a lot of clients that I could bring to the table and be a rainmaker in a firm. So this was a good opportunity. The first firm I was at that eventually got bought out by my current company, it was a company where you really did fight everything to the tooth and nail, no matter what. That was the philosophy, and there's nothing wrong with that. As long as it was legal and you had a defense, you were expected to pursue it, and that's fine. When we got bought out by my current employer, though, whether or not to pursue something became a different issue. Now it wasn't just, is it legal, but is it the right thing to do? Does it impact the brand in some way? Is there a moral question that maybe we shouldn't do this or we should do this? And I've had 3 GCs all of whom have been terrific, and they've all had that same mindset. So for the last, 20, 25 years of the time I've been with this company, that has been something that I can go to my boss and say, look, yeah, I know we've got a legal defense, but there's something else going on here, that we should maybe think about not pursuing this or going a different tact. And I'm not going to get in trouble for bringing that up. And they're going to listen to me and they're going to say yes or no based on a philosophy of what's good for the company, but also what's good as a corporate citizen. What are we doing that's right as a company? So,
do you find that's easier or harder to do your job?
Much easier.
Much easier.
And the reason I say that is it resonates with me personally because I do think that, the law is very rigid in some respects. And because of that rigidity, a lot of times things don't fit into it. It's like a square hole in a round peg. And there may be other things you should consider. A lot of people don't. I see that a lot with the people I oppose on the other side. This is the law. And I'm like, well, but what about X, Y, or Z? And so I think that being able to make decisions that are right from not only a brand standpoint, but as I said, a corporate citizen or a moral aspect, I think that's a lot easier. You can make those recommendations. Somebody else says yes or no, but I think it works.
So that ethos, like, where do you think that comes from? Does that just come from just the founder of your company? Does that come from sort of a more pragmatic connection between kind of this longer term view that, hey, if we plant good seeds in the right soil over time, that's going to add value? Or do you feel like it's just sort of disconnected from, I always kind of tie things down to stock price because or like enterprise value. Cause I feel like that's what a lot of people,
right.
That's the adversary that folks are kind of going up against. I believe that a long-term, I believe that this is an infinite game and that short-termism can really fly in the face of a lot of effectiveness and cause us to do some things that, ultimately in retrospect can, feel like we cut our nose off to spite our face. So like, where do you think that ethos is rooted in?
I think that was the ethos when I got on board. That was the culture. And I was actually a little bit surprised by it, to be honest with you.
Sure. It's rare.
I think it is. And I think that it comes from the C-suite. I think that's always been their mindset. We have a brand we want to protect. I mean, we don't want to see the morning news talk about something that we've done that looks bad. I mean, pragmatically, that's also a concern. But I think that from the leadership that I have seen, I think that being a good corporate citizen is part of our culture. It's part of my company is. And they want to do that. And that means different things to different leaders, but doing what's right for the brand, doing what's right for your employees. I mean, the employees and the customer are very centric in our philosophies as a company. So I think that all ties into what is the right thing to do. I think that's where it comes from. That's me speculating based on what I've seen for the last 20 years, but I do believe that's where it comes from.
But it's so interesting, right? Like you've had multiple GCs. I'm sure there's been multiple CEOs. The markets have been up and down over time. We've been in recessions over that time and expansions during that time. It's interesting and, obviously commendable, but I always find it interesting when a company, which is a company is like a body in the sense that they say in a 7-year period, all the cells in your body are like changed. So physically, at the atomic level, we're constantly changing as people. And yet, when a company can sort of maintain that ethos, it's extremely interesting to me.
Well, and I think that's because, normally you get a succession and they see the leadership and, my GCs have all exhibited that behavior. So it is learned behavior as a leader. I started out, I wasn't in a leadership position, but I saw the first GC here that I worked for who exhibited that kind of ethos and behavior and compassion. And you learn that as a leader, and you learn that when you're looking up to someone and trying to decide what kind of leader you want to be. So I do think it's by repetition and learning, and it's a learned behavior.
And how have you seen the commitment or the allegiance to this ethos of doing the right thing over doing what's legal? How have you seen that sort of trickle across the organization, and how has that perhaps created like a tailwind for more compliant, behavior across all your different locations and across all these different layers within your organization?
And that's an interesting, because that's kind of something that I thought of today when I was preparing for this. The first GC that I had with the new company, one of his quotes was that the legal department was the conscience of the company. And he expected us to remember that and frankly to act accordingly.
Wow.
So, we have all kinds of legal obligations, Sarbanes-Oxley, you've got to report if you see something inappropriate, that kind of thing. But his dedication, and it's been since him as well, that we have the obligation to make sure we protect the brand, our employees, our customers. If we're doing something wrong, we have that obligation to bring it forward. And he expected that. If it was against him, I would have felt very comfortable. Now, I never had that situation, but I would have felt comfortable reporting, something inappropriate, because that was the expectation that he laid out for everybody. And if we had a group meeting, that was always a topic that came up is, we are the conscience of the company. We need to make sure that we do things that are legal. And then in this very litigious environment that we all live in, obviously not following the law is dangerous. So obviously we try to make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's on the legal aspects of our cases, of our policies and our procedures. But there is that philosophy that we should make sure that everybody in the company is doing what they're supposed to be doing. And we do, I think.
Yeah, I love that. In our pre-show, you talked about, you had this really cool quote that has stuck with me. And it was something like, we can't mortgage our integrity. What did you mean by that? And how do you ensure that integrity and ethics are really central to the decision-making in this highly litigious environment, or when you're litigating something that's touchy?
I think and what I meant by that was, it's one of those things that it may take you decades to build up a reputation for integrity and honor, and one bad act can destroy it, and you may never get it back. And so you can spend your whole career trying to be a person with integrity and ethics, and one mistake can just bring you down. And so you have to be careful that everything you do is, in fact, ethical and that it is something that you should do as a matter of integrity. And so the way I do it as a leader with my team, we talk about it at team meetings. They know that that's the expectation. If there is any question that something is appropriate or ethical, we talk about it, and then we make sure that the law supports us. And if not, we find out what we can do and what we can't do. And we know that team knows that if they make a promise, if they make a representation to the court, to our opponent, to the client, it needs to be 100%, or at least as 100% as they know it at the time. We just don't, there are very few things that will get me upset at my team. I like them that much, but acting without integrity or honor would be one of them. And they know that.
Yeah. And it seems like you kind of model that. And it seems like you've worked, luckily you've worked for leaders that have allowed that to come out in you. I mean, we all, I'll just kind of speak for myself. When I first stepped into a corporate environment, I very quickly saw that there's kind of a lay of the land and there's sort of a power dynamic and some, power structures that, cause, whatever you want to call it. Like you walk barefoot on the pavement long enough, you're going to get a little calloused, And so you have to kind of hide pieces of yourself. And it sounds like you worked with people that kind of set a good example and allowed you to kind of take off some of that armor that maybe somebody else in your position in a different company had to sort of put on just to survive. And as you were kind of talking about, this, I was thinking about this thing that we talk about all the time in the ethics space about, the tone from the top. Man, if that tone from the top is not right, then having an ethical organization, you have no odds of like achieving that. But as you were talking, I was thinking like everybody is like the tone for the top or the tone from the top for somebody else. And like, as you come into a leadership position, how have you seen, or how have you been enabled to make sure that tone is right for everybody else, and you're carrying that vibe forward? Because like, again, everything's changing all the time, right? People on your teams are changing. You've had dozens of people on your teams. How have you sort of stayed true to that core?
We've had probably 3 new people in the last couple of years, and it goes with just the leadership, the communication with your team, making sure people are comfortable coming to you with questions. How do you handle this? What's the best way to do this, Betty? And so that's what I do. That's what I don't want to call them lieutenants. I sound like I'm but anyway, the people that help me run the team, they know that's the philosophy. They need to have open door, but because we don't want people to make mistakes or do something because they don't have the knowledge. And so the expectations are set from day one. Everything has to be above board, and they know that, and we are available to make sure that if they have questions or concerns, that there is someone to help them remedy whatever the situation is.
So in the litigation, department, you're kind of cleaning up messes. There's like a mess that's already happened in a lot of cases. Would you say?
I would agree with that.
That's always interesting, right? Because, a lot of the ethos that we've been talking about of doing the right thing is meant to sort of prevent those things from happening. But I think everybody is always watching, I have kids, and, I might say one thing, but they're going to really kind of tune in to it seems like they tune in most to what they see me doing and the extent to which our deeds sort of follow our words,
Right.
What advice do you give your team when there's an ethically complex thing that they're dealing with to balance, again, just to give this question some context, probably very rarely is someone coming to you, and joining your team with no experience at all, right? Like they've at least been through college and like law school, presumably, right? So how do you sort of like assess and like tear away some of that armor that they might be bringing so that they feel equipped to make that ethically correct decision, even in the context of a mess that like you're cleaning up?
Once again, it goes down to communications. I mean, when we vet somebody, one of the biggest things about hiring somebody for my team, for example, the most recent 3 people we hired all had 15 years experience. So they were not, and that's 15 years post law school.
Right.
So they had some experience in litigating and in dealing with opposing counsel and the courts and that sort of thing. So once again, the expectations are set from day one. This is what we expect. If you have a question, you come talk to me. And then they also see it in the way that we handle our own cases. For example, a couple of years ago, just to give you an example of this,
Yeah.
I had a case. It was hard fought over in San Francisco. I had some senior executives who were really wanting to help fight this case. And then in the middle of it, the company had a reduction in force. And a couple of my key witnesses were going to be let go. Now, not immediately, but a couple months down the line. And so we're fighting this case, and they are loyal and they want to fight the case and they want to do what's right to defend us. But also, they are thinking about what's the next step for me? What's the next stage of my career? And we had an opportunity to settle the case. It was more than I wanted to settle it for. I thought more than it was worth, but it was still within the realm of maybe we should consider it. So I talked to the senior HR person in charge of this case, and I said, look, I know we want to fight this case, but we have these people. They're not going to be with us in about 6 months. They need to move on. They need to find a job. They need to take care of their families. And this executive was incredible. He immediately jumped to what I was saying. He goes, you're absolutely right, and it's worth a few dollars to do this. And so we settled this case a little more than we wanted to. But part of the motivation was the employees who were helping us. Yeah, they were still wanting to help us, but there were more important factors. I mean, we've already told them we're not going to have a place for them. They're still helping us out with the defense. But the issue is these people need to be able to stop doing this and move forward with the next step for them. What's the next stage in their career? And by doing that and doing something that, and I was very gratified to see the company take my recommendation and do it because it really was the right thing for our people that were helping us defend the case. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great example. And I'm sure that sent a pretty strong message. I mean, like your values are proven in the fire or in the fight or something. You know what I'm saying? It's so easy to do the clip art values. You know what I'm saying? You can just
and if you don't live them, they don't stick. I mean, and you know what I mean? If I don't see that example I was even surprised. I always thought the company lived its values, but even that was a surprise to me. I was so happy that it happened, but I didn't know that he would really do it. And the response was because of these employees, we wanted to do the right thing for our employees. It was fantastic, frankly. But you're right. You have to exhibit the behavior to keep it going, both for the new people and then the people above me have to do it as well for me and the people coming behind me, frankly.
Yeah. And also, your company may not have exhibited those values as you say, had you not felt comfortable advocating for these people.
Exactly.
And think about that,
Yep.
like if
that's true. That's a good point.
If your boss who made that decision and said, yeah, it's worth a couple of bucks to do the right thing. If he didn't know about that, if he didn't know about this reduction in force and he didn't know that detail, well, then they probably would have moved forward in that sort of status quo approach.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think you're right. And that's why I think that it has to be top down. I think you're right when you said that. You have to give your people the comfort to come to you. I mean, I have a standard rule and some of my people do it, some of them don't. But if I do something they don't like, they need to come tell me. You can't fix what you don't know is a problem. That's kind of a standard. And I think,
right.
You know what I mean? So you have to know. And I'm like, look, if you want to drop me a note, you want to come talk to me, whatever you want to do. But if there's something I'm doing that's making you think I could do it better, I'm not giving you the support you need, whatever it is. And there will be times, I will oppose a settlement, for example. I have one person that I particularly didn't like, and he sued us numerous times. And I'm like, no, we're not going to settle with him. Never again. Well, the attorney that was handling the case came to me and said, Betty, we can get rid of this for a song. You're just too angry, da, 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 da. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. That's not the best thing for the client. I'm going to step back, think about what the best, and we ended up resolving a couple of cases with this guy since, because one of my people came to me and said, wait a minute, Betty, is that really the best thing for the company? Is that really the best thing for the client? And I'm like, yeah, you're right. I'm just kind of annoyed with this guy. So because he felt comfortable coming to me and saying, come on, are you serious? We ended up getting a good result and we didn't have to try a couple of cases. So
yeah, there's never more groupthink than in a room by myself. Exactly. I need some other people to help me come to the right answer, often. And if they don't feel empowered to share their idea or call me on my BS, yes, I do have some BS from time to time, then the odds of us getting to that right answer is, zero.
Exactly. And I respect someone who will come to me and say, you know what, Betty, you're just not thinking it through. And I respect that. And I won't get upset. I'll step back and we'll talk it through. And I think dialogue is the best way to do the right thing for your client. It's also the best way to make sure you don't do something that's not in the best interest of your client.
Yeah, but that's hard. It's hard to, exhibit. I mean, that takes courage, especially going to a boss or going up the chain. Or, I mean, it takes courage just to raise your hand as just a frontline stakeholder who sees something that's wrong in the organization. And there's so many opportunities, I think, to really, honor people that have exhibited that courage. Because if we can do that and people can see, I just always picture, like, I don't know, a pack of animals, at a frozen pond, there's always going to be one that's going to be the first one to walk out. And once that one walks out and, the others can see that, like, they're not going to fall through to their death, then the others, then they'll follow. And I think we as leaders have to take that opportunity, any opportunity, to, reinforce this thing that we hopefully can see from everybody.
Exactly. And so in this particular case, at the next team meeting, we talked about it. And I said, this is an example. If you want to do this, you're not going to offend me. In fact, I think it's your obligation. If I'm doing something that, or making a decision that you think is not in the best interest, talk to me about it. Let's dialogue about it, because there may be things I know that you don't. And there may be things that you know because you're actually on the front lines that I'm not aware of. So we should talk about it.
So I love that. I love that leadership philosophy. And I love that example, because, like, leadership is not just a bunch of words. It's not merely gravitas. It's performative. And I think, back to what I said, people are going to look at your actions more than anything. As you've sort of grown as a leader, how did you develop this? Was that just a natural instinct? Was it modeled for you, or was it kind of by like just through experience that you realize that this is really the most efficient, path up the mountain?
I have to be honest with you. I think it's just something that's kind of innate in me. And I say that before I got into a leadership role, I did notice that every time we hired somebody, you can learn something from them.
Right.
It's not, you're the new guy, you don't have anything to add. But I noticed that every time somebody came to us, they might have a better way of doing a document production, or they might have a better way of preserving evidence or trying a case. And so as an attorney coming up through the ranks, I noticed that there were things I could get from everybody. There was always something to learn. And I guess I'm a lifelong learner. I love learning new things. I'm always trying things just to do something different. So I think it's part of my personality more than anything else. But I also think that it's part of how I interact with people. I mean, my team is great. I mean, I could tell you story after story about the different people and what they do, why they're so good at what they do. I have the guy who can try a case and is better than any of us trying a case. I've got the guy who can write circles around all of us because he should be a professor, and then the rest of us kind of fall in the middle, So, but everybody has a gift, and we just have to figure out what that is and recognize.
And I think what you described, really, this openness for new ways of doing things, really probably opens your eyes to finding those gifts for other people on your team. I mean, the total should be more than the sum of its parts if a team is really if there's really like synergy in that team,
I agree with that. I like that. And that's true. I think that's why we are successful and have been successful for the company, is because we do have each other's backs, we learn from each other, and we support each other. I think that's very well said.
How did you get into this field? At some point, did you always want to be an attorney?
How did I become an attorney? I've always kind of wanted to be an attorney, but I will tell you honestly, I always wanted to be a criminal attorney. So now that I'm doing civil law, that's kind of funny. But I came to my company thinking I'd be here a couple of years, because I wanted to go to the U.S. Attorney's Office, and I had done an internship there in college, or in college, law school. And basically was told you really needed to have experience in-house, in a firm. So I was in a firm for a couple of years. I thought, I'll go there for a couple of years and I will leave and then try to get to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And when I got here, because we were actively doing the litigation, I was getting significant experience as a very young lawyer. I mean, I was here 2 years and I had an argument before the Seventh Circuit, which was
Wow.
unheard of. And it was exciting. I mean, nowhere else could I get that kind of experience, even at the U.S. Attorney's Office, probably. So, I stayed a little bit longer, and then next thing I know, it's 33 years.
How crazy. I mean, but
It
also
goes fast.
how lucky in a way, I mean, that's a very rare thing, particularly today.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And the mass of people at the office have changed over the 30 years. And now, it's funny, when I started, I was just telling my husband this the other day. When I started, I was the baby attorney, and now I'm the sage, so to speak. So it's interesting to see the transition over, the 30 years.
What attracted you to litigation? Because there's 1,000 paths out of law school.
There are 1,000 paths. I guess I watch too much LA Law. That's my best guess. But it always seemed like the idea of putting together a story and telling the story and presenting it to a jury. In our situation, we do a lot of arbitration as well, which is the same thing. You're presenting your story to an arbitrator. But just telling that story and putting it together. I love puzzles, and a lot of times putting a case together, finding the motivation, finding the various pieces of the facts and putting them all together. I think one of the things I do well is finding the facts and putting them into a cohesive format. I think that's probably one of my strongest attributes. And it's just something that I love. And litigation lends itself to that. Transactional law would have driven me crazy. Not that I have peers who are fantastic, but that's just not interesting for me. That's not where I live.
Yeah, there's something for everyone, for sure. I find it interesting. So I talk to a lot of ethics and compliance officers, and a lot of them came from law school or came out of law. And I kind of presume that anybody who went to law school, like, you have to take at least one litigation course, right?
Oh yeah, I think you do. Definitely have to do an ethics course.
Yes. There's this interesting thing though going on in our space where a lot of ethics and compliance officers or departments, they're viewed as a cost center. And to me, I think they're really value centers, because if they're doing their job right, it's building this culture of integrity that we've just spent the last 20 minutes talking about. It's building a culture where people can believe the ethos that is, espoused by leadership, or just, that is in the code of conduct. And that unlocks so much value in my mind. It allows people to be more engaged. It allows them to drop that, armor that comes from being, jaded in the corporate machine that is, corporate America. And there's just so many positive externalities from that kind of a vibe, where people feel the real belonging and they feel that safety to raise their hand and raise their voice and so forth.
Yep.
I find it kind of puzzling, and you love puzzles, so maybe you can help with this puzzle. I find it puzzling how these professionals who have come out of law, who have been versed to some degree in argumentation, in building a case and making a compelling argument and telling a compelling story, struggle to apply those same skills within the business to show their value, to paint that picture, and ultimately get the resources they need. Like the cost, the cost of being a cost center is you never get the resources you need, and you're looking out over the fence at all these green pastures, marketing, all these other departments who are getting money thrown at them. Like, why do you think that is the case? Like that, this skill, we have this tool. Many of us are well versed in this tool. Like, there's no idiot. Like, I don't talk to any idiots in this space. Everybody's smart. Everybody cares. But it's almost like there's this disconnect to say, like, oh yeah, I have a hammer here, and I got to pound this nail in. Like, why do you think that is?
I think part of it is just corporate. The way corporations are set up. I mean, you've got to add value. You've got to bring the bottom line is really where the measurement is, what the stock looks like. And I think legal departments in general are considered to be
agree.
Cost. They don't bring value. And one of the things that we have always done as an in-house litigation team is, we can point to what we would pay outside counsel to do what we do, and it would cost a lot more. And so we do add value, and I think we can prove that just because of the amount of work we do. But I think that's corporate right as far as having legal departments be a cost center, not, contributing to the bottom line. Because I don't think you can put a dollar figure on changing the ethos, or you know what I mean, or making the people understand that. I think that's the perception anyway. Whether that's true or not, it's a different issue, perhaps.
But I mean, there's probably, there's few episodes of LA Law where there's just one thing that paints the whole picture and drives the
Right.
whole argument. It's a mosaic, and you're pulling together different data points and whatever to sort of craft the story. And when I think about, if it's a jury trial, you're trying to persuade and influence this group of people to give you the ruling or whatever that, you're going for. And it seems like, I don't know, it seems like there's some kind of a disconnect because, fine, you can't put a dollar value on doing the right thing, but that should show up in other places, like it should show, it should show up in a bunch of different places. It show up in more engagement or, a lower turnover relative to your competitors who aren't as committed to doing the right thing. Or, there's a bunch of examples, recently in the retail space of organizations who have just been kind of blades of grass in the wind and haven't really stood on their values. And that's shown up in people, boycotting, certain organizations, and, their stock price is getting smashed. And to me, that is proof of the value that, a true kind of like allegiance to values has on a corporate machine.
I agree with that. And I think part of it, though, is corporations do live and die by the numbers, and that's the hard part. I mean, I think that's the answer. But I think good corporations understand that, and they have good legal teams, and they listen to them. So there is a value that gets spread across the organization. It may just not be measurable from the standpoint of what goodwill that generates in the public and the community at large.
Yeah, I think that's right. So maybe the answer is just, going back to what we were talking before, maybe the answer is really just underwriting the right opportunity and making sure that, your own ethos, or that the company you're joining has an ethos that resonates with yours.
Yep, I think that's right. I can't imagine working for a company where I didn't feel like I could be who I am, whether that's, telling my truth, I guess is the way the kids are saying it now, but being who I want to be. That's what I would tell, a young lawyer coming in is make sure you go someplace where you can be who you are. You don't have to do something you're not comfortable with. You don't have to say something you're not comfortable with, and make sure you can do the job you're hired to do, which is making sure your company follows the law, protects its brand, protects its people and its customers. And if you can't do that, then maybe that's not a good place to be.
Do you feel like you've always had the confidence to live out what you're talking about? Or do you feel like that's been, that what you're talking about really just was like bloomed over time?
It bloomed over time. And I will tell you, it probably bloomed the most once I became in a leadership role, because you feel like you have a little more control. And that's the reality of it. I don't know that it would be fair to be super critical of a lawyer who came in very new and didn't feel comfortable, making waves because they saw something that they were uncomfortable with. I think that's tremendously difficult. I don't know.
Yeah, and I guess it takes time to find your voice. There's and maybe finding your voice is starting to like know who you are, and like maybe you can't be true to yourself if you don't even know who you are.
Right. And I think it depends on when you come into the business, and what kind of experiences you had. I think somebody coming right out of law school, that's going to be very difficult to find their voice. But
yeah, I think that's right. Go ahead.
Yeah, but no, it's okay. I was just going to say, but we've hired lawyers that are 15 years out. They've had some experience. They've had some leadership roles. And so they feel a little bit more comfortable, especially when they're encouraged to step up and speak out. But I think leaders have that obligation to encourage the people to do that as well.
Isn't that crazy? I mean, I say all the time that like the people who you're closest to outside of work, they know the real you. Right. And you don't have that pretense, and you don't have this like facade up. And then we spend most of our time in this other kind of world, this like this other environment, the work world, living in those four walls. And at least myself, like I felt like I showed up for so long as like a different person. And it wasn't until I got maybe more mature or more confident in myself to just be my true self. It's like only then did I start to gain traction. And only then did it, is the,
I agree with
is
that.
my influence able to like be, closer to its potential, or the impact that is, potentially out there, more closely like achieved. You know what I mean?
That's interesting you say that, because one of the conversations I've had with friends and my husband is that I finally feel like my work personality and my home personality are so much closer to the same.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, there were times when I'd say, well, you wouldn't see me at work, I'd be a different person. And that's true. I would be. I mean, effectively. But I don't think that's the case anymore. I think age, I think age has a role in it as well, and maturity and so on.
Yeah, I think that's right. I was talking to this young guy, and like this guy is golden. Like he's going to be phenomenal. But you could tell that it was like he was working in our company. It was like his first corporate job, and I could just see how guarded he was. And I was really like, man, like the real you is the guy. Like that's who people are going to buy, regardless of what your role is. Like we're all selling something. We're selling ourselves. We're selling our idea, and I don't know. It's hard to speak through a veil, It's hard to speak.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's a good way to put it. It's amazing when I look back at who I was right out of law school and the attorney I am now and the person I am now. I mean, there's kind of a wide gulf there. It's amazing when I think about it.
Yeah, it's so crazy. So if we could go back in time, as we're getting to the end here, and you could find a young Betty and give her a piece of advice, like what is that piece of advice you wish you had when you were younger?
When I was younger, I think the idea is what we just talked about: show up as yourself. I know that's hard to do, but to encourage myself to do that and not to. I mean, I think the first 2 years I practiced in a firm, I absolutely hated the practice of law, despised it. And when I got to my current employer and started actually litigating, because as a young lawyer, you're stuck in the library. That's what you're doing. That is no
Right.
fun. I don't care what anybody tells you. But when I actually got to start being in charge of my own cases and actually doing what I think I was meant to do, and I think what I would tell myself, if you're unhappy, leave. I mean, a lot of employers may not want to hear that, but I think that if you're unhappy, there's a reason for it. It's either it's not the right place for you, you're not being able to be your true self, and either one of those is probably a good reason to leave.
Yeah, just because like a shoe doesn't fit your foot doesn't mean that there's something wrong with your foot.
Exactly. That is exactly right. That's 100% it. And I think that initially I thought, man, I don't like practicing law. You spend all this time and money going through law school. What are you going to do? I just hadn't found the right place to practice law. That was the issue.
And what about this thing of like doing it your way? I mean, I feel like in so many different things that I've gotten involved with, I've sort of assumed that there's some recipe, like there is like, this is the way, and obviously there are recipes, like there's a certain recipe to make a beef Wellington, but there's so much room in any creative endeavor, which is what all our work is in this knowledge work economy. Like our application of our gifts is directly drives our work product. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like what would you tell somebody who's kind of stuck in that thing? I mean, who maybe isn't working with somebody who is as open as you are, or as tuned into the gifts that they have, who is feeling like, a little stifled? Is it just, hey, start experimenting? Is it, be your true self and let the chips fall where they may? Like, how do we help those kinds of folks? Because I just felt like trapped in that quicksand for so long.
No, and I understand that. And I think that was part of my issue at the firm. And I think when I became a leader, I felt freer to do my own thing, because I have a certain style with respect to when we settle cases, when we don't. I can be a certain way in a deposition. There's certain procedures, and some of them are not what you would normally expect. It's not the classical view of it, and that's okay. I have learned that works for me, and I think that I would tell these lawyers that they have to find what works for them. When we teach a new lawyer to do a deposition, I want them to see 3 or 4 people do a deposition. And the reason is
Yeah.
one style doesn't fit everybody. You need to see my style, see this person's style, and see if you can craft your own style out of the pieces of that or something completely different. But I don't think that there's one size fits all in litigation for my team. And I encourage them to find their own way of doing it. If they want to adopt my style and they're comfortable with it, that's terrific. But if they think I'm too aggressive and they want to be, one of my guys is always friends with his opponents, I'm like, that's terrific. He's nicer than I am, so that makes sense. But it's okay to be different, and I don't expect everybody to be the same way as I am. And I think that leaders have to give their people that freedom so that people can develop and you can get their potential. Otherwise, you're not going to let them meet their potential, and I think that does a disservice to your organization.
Yeah, and it does a disservice to them as people. I mean, as you get more comfortable, making the dish your way, you can just add so much flair, and you can put so much more of yourself into it, and put so much more creativity, as opposed to like constantly editing ourselves. We had our friends had us over for dinner last night, and my buddy made chicken piccata, and it was phenomenal. And I was like, oh man, I want to make this. And so I was looking through YouTube, like, recipes for chicken piccata, and like every recipe was a little different. And I was like, okay, well, this is kind of the shape of the dish. This is how you do it. And, I was starting to get ideas on how I could make it. But it's like, I have to keep learning that lesson over and over again, that there's no just one way up the mountain. There's 100 paths up the mountain. You know what I mean? And there's so much freedom in that,
But, you probably do the same thing I do. I mean, I'm constantly evolving my craft and how I practice. And I have a guy who tries cases that's brilliant. And I'm like, every time I see him try a case, I get a new idea for something I want to try. And so I don't feel like I'm ever done learning how to be a lawyer. I guess they call it the practice of law for a reason. But I think that even the leaders need to be willing to keep changing the recipe a little bit.
Yeah. And I think as we wrap up, maybe we can end on this, like that openness to new ideas really does prevent us from like calcifying into what I think the most dangerous person is, which is someone who's seen it all. I've seen it all before. It's like, well, no, you haven't. You technically haven't. And things are changing all the time. And it's so easy to fall into these like old traps where this rigidity really can limit our flexibility of, new ideas, the application of new ideas,
And I think it's boring. I mean,
it is boring.
It's like,
yes,
I've got a few more years I want to work. Do I really want to do the same thing every day, the same way over and over and over?
Right.
I think staleness impacts your effectiveness, and in addition to your interest level, but I think it will impact your effectiveness for your client and frankly, your leadership for your team. You've got to be willing to change so they can evolve as well.
I love it. Well, Betty, thank you so much for coming. This was so fun. I feel ready to try some new things, and I just appreciate how generous you've been with your experiences, because there's so much to learn from your journey.
Well, thank you so much. I enjoyed it, and good luck with the piccata.
Thanks.
Take care.